Good evening. All right, guys, how's it going? I am going to say tonight, straight off the bat, that you're going to hate me if this goes wrong, but I'm going to say right now we are going to get through this evening's show without any technical hitches. Yeah, I mean, who knows where this is going to go, but I can tell you what happened after last week's show, which I was ashamed at how tragic that was in terms of the way the tech let me down. It was flaky, it kept freezing, there was all sorts going wrong. I went straight out after the show, got straight online and ordered myself a new camera. So I'm hoping you can see me today in better clarity, in better resolution, hopefully better lit, and I hope it's going to be a really stable quality connection and we should be able to go through it. Thank you very much. So let's hope that works, otherwise I'm going to look like a right idiot after saying that. But here we go. Last race of the season, done. We are finished. The 2020 season, which we didn't even think would get off the ground, would get going at all after the disaster that was the Australian Grand Prix situation, ended up being, I think, something pretty special. For me, I don't know what you think on this, let me know. For me, one of the greatest seasons that we have had in recent years, I would say. I mean, tell me when you think the last best season was before 2020. I'd love to know that, but I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And that is massive credit to everybody involved for putting that show on the road. That's the people at Formula One, at Liberty, for making it happen. That's FOM, that's FIA, all of the circuits, the organisers, the marshals, the teams, the families of those teams that got left behind when everybody went away in what was a really intense period. A lot of friends of mine, hated what they had to do this, since the season got underway because it was a massive sacrifice. But on the flip side of that, beforehand, they had a long period at home during the whole lockdown situation, and they were doing it because, like all of us, we were desperate to get back to Formula One. So absolutely mega. 2012, you're all saying, yeah, that's a fair shout. 2012 was a great season too. So I think that was probably the last time though, wasn't it? So that's not bad to say 2020, after all those years, was the greatest season since 2012. I think we'll take that, won't we? Epic. And I think what's also going to come out of this is that next year and beyond, some of the things we've learnt in 2020, some of the experiments that we've tried in terms of things like circuits, I think could actually remain. We might get some legacy from this weird 2020 season that might actually just hang around. We might get a little bit more experimentation, a little bit more trying new things, and hopefully that makes it better, less predictable, better for us as fans. So there we go. I hope that you'll agree that it's been a great season. Having said that, the last race of the season in Abu Dhabi, absolute shocker, wasn't it? Absolute shocker. But then it's Abu Dhabi. What did we expect? Did we expect anything different? No, of course not. It's a circuit that doesn't lend itself to great racing. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But even though the actual action on the racetrack might have been less than great, let's be kind and put it that way, there were so many storylines playing out, weren't there? Not only at the front of the race, where Max did a stunning job to blitz the weekend, really, and genuinely outperform the Mercedes on pace, but even behind that amazing battle for third place in the Constructors' Championship, which, went all the way to the wire. And I think that was one of the highlights of the season, was how that kept changing, particularly over the last few races. So there we go. I think there was loads of things to keep us interested, even if on the final day the racing wasn't great. But there we go. Hello to you all. Hi from Mars, says McLaren won race. Hello. But all over the world, all over Earth, most of you. Thanks very much for joining. Where shall we start? Let's start with this question from, who's it from? Neil Roberts. And I think this kind of sums it up quite nicely. Neil Roberts says, I haven't seen yesterday's race yet, so it might have been an exciting race. It wasn't, Neil. But why does Abu Dhabi always seem to produce boring races? Given money's not a problem there, what changes would you like to see to make the racing better? And I think that's a really good question, because why is it that one of the richest events on the entire calendar has come up with a circuit where they spent hundreds of millions of pounds, dollars, whatever, putting this thing together, and yet it's probably one of the worst circuits for exciting racing. Year on year, it's always more or less the same. Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, the actual layout of the circuit doesn't necessarily lend itself to great racing, because It doesn't have the sequences of corners that some other circuits have. You know, to stage an overtake, you either need a really long, fast straight into a slow corner, so a big braking zone. If you can extend the braking zone, gives you an opportunity for drivers to lunge down the inside. There is that spot in Abu Dhabi's track. There's that one at the end of that back straight. That's a big braking zone for massive speed, but that's really the only point in the circuit that you can get that overtaking done around there, with DRS as well as a helper. So you either need those, or you need a sequence of corners where there are multiple lines going through them. And actually, the other part of this, and if you think about something like Barcelona, for example, the corners that lead onto a straight also have a big impact in the modern era. So in Barcelona, you have that really sort of tight, twisty section, don't you, in Sector 3, but then you come out of a sort of long, sweeping, fast right-hander onto that start-finish straight. Because you're coming through that medium speed corner, I guess it is, the last corner, that's a difficult corner to follow because you're going at reasonable speed. You get that weight, that turbulent weight coming off the car in front. You can't follow closely enough. And therefore, when you get onto the straight, you're not close enough to enable or to use DRS to get past. So there's all of these factors that play into it. And the other big one in Abu Dhabi, and this is a really big one that plays into strategy, is the fact that the pit lane is so long, and the pit lane exit is this really long winding exit that goes underneath the circuit. Therefore, the penalty for making a pit stop is enormous. And that kind of forces everybody into a one-stop race, which isn't really what most people want to do. It's not the fastest way from lights to flag if you took out the pit stop bit. But because of the penalty for making the pit stop, nobody wants to make any more than they have to, which means everybody's nursing the car round way slower than it really could possibly go, just to get to the end on one single pit stop. So all of those elements go into making a racetrack not really lend itself to great racing. Now, to answer your question, Neil, why on earth is that the case, given they had an almost endless budget to create this? I don't know. I don't know the answer. It's one of the biggest disappointments with that place. The glitz and the glamour of the place is incredible. The setting is incredible. The atmosphere, normally with crowd, but under the lights and as the sun goes down, is incredible. But the track itself, it's just, they've missed a trick. And, you know, any racing driver, any racing engineer would look at that on a piece of paper and say, well, that's not going to give you great racing. So why is it that people designing these racetracks can't see that? And it's way more complicated than I've just described, but there are some certain elements that you feel like you need. And you've only got to look at the circuits that year on year give us great racing and look at the elements that go into making up those circuits to say, well, shouldn't we surely be incorporating some of those in a brand new track like Abu Dhabi? So it baffles me as well, Neil. I totally agree with you. In terms of what could we do about it, for me, one of the biggest ones is that pit lane loss time. Every engineer in the team will tell you there's almost no scenario, unless you get weird things like safety cars and weird races happening. There's almost no normal scenario where any team would want to gamble on a second pit stop if they can possibly avoid it. So you can either think about changing the exit, changing the actual layout of the pit lane, but that's really not very easy. You could do things like increase the pit lane speed limit, but that of course has various safety implications too. You could also do things around tyres to try and force a second pit stop. But like I said, teams will always try and drive the cars slower on the racetrack rather than take the gamble on making the extra pit stop. There we go. So that, I think it's a real shame that that's the way Abu Dhabi has turned out. Money is driving that event, and it is a great event apart from that bit of it. And I don't think it's going anywhere very soon. So we're kind of stuck with it. Perhaps we shouldn't expect too much different if we go there again next year with almost the same parameters. But like I said at the start of this show, given that 2020 has offered up this chance to start mixing things up and trying new things, maybe we should go there next year and try something different. Maybe we should try something. This will put the cat amongst the pigeons. Should we try a reverse grid at Abu Dhabi? Should we try some extreme tyre options that might force a different type of strategy? Should we try a rule that says you must use all three compounds in the race and try it out at a racetrack like Abu Dhabi? For me, I'd love to see that sort of thing. A little bit of experimentation, I think, has worked well in 2020. I'd love to see it go further on. There we go. That's the end of my rant about Abu Dhabi. Let's see what you guys are all saying. The Tilke tracks are all terrible, says Cosmos 2017. I have to say a lot of them are, not all of them, definitely not all of them, but a lot of them are, absolutely. And it's a real shame. That's what I mean. When somebody as experienced as Tilke, who has designed some great racetracks in the past, comes up with something like that, I think it's a real shame. When do you think, we'll come back to that one. Oh, let's take it now. When do you think George Russell will move to Mercedes, and which driver will he replace? Lindy. Well, this is actually a good question. We might as well come on to it because it's been a big talking point over recent weeks. Mercedes are not going to put George Russell in the car next year. They're not going to start suddenly scrapping Valtteri Bottas's contract and replacing him with George Russell next year. On one hand, it actually makes no sense for the team. Look, every year they have come first and second with Lewis and Valtteri. The perfect outcome, the perfect scenario. I've talked about this a lot. Why would they want to throw somebody else in there? Yeah, George may well get some better results. He might push Lewis. But is that what Mercedes really want? Not really. When it comes to 2022, I think it's a very different game altogether. We've got brand new cars, we've got different rules. It's all changing. So maybe at that point, yeah, change up the driver lineup. Who will he replace? Well, I think to answer the first part of your question, 2022 is when George will make the step up if he continues the progression that he's showing now. Who will he replace? Everything about me says he will replace Valtteri Bottas, and that is going on the huge assumption that Lewis Hamilton signs a contract at Mercedes and will still be there in 2022, which I think will happen. And if that's the case, George Russell can have at least 1 year, maybe 2 years alongside the champ, alongside Lewis to learn the ropes. And then maybe if Lewis walks away, George Russell is there to step up and assume that team leader role whilst they bring on somebody else alongside him. That's the way I imagine it playing out. But there are still some major unknowns in that. Lewis at the moment still hasn't signed a contract as far as we know. Right, let's see. Russell in when Hamilton retires, Sandy Barnes says. I think it's going to be before that, unless Lewis throws us a massive shock over the next couple of months, which I don't see happening. I honestly think that Lewis, I think we're going to get some driver announcements this week. In the next few days, this week, maybe the early part of next week, I think we're going to hear some news, both about the Red Bull seat and probably about that Mercedes seat too. And I don't think, when it comes to the Mercedes seat, we're going to be very shocked. When it comes to the Red Bull seat, all the rumours coming out of Abu Dhabi, and I have no other inside knowledge other than what you guys will have heard over the weekend on the broadcasts from the guys that were there, that it does look more and more likely that Sergio Perez is going to get a go in that Red Bull. And for me, I think that's a good decision. I definitely don't want to see Alex Albon out on his ear. I think he's a lovely kid. I think he's hugely talented, but he just can't make that Red Bull work. He can't do what Red Bull need him to do in that car. He's had a good chance. To be fair to Red Bull, they've been very patient with him. They've given him the support that he needs. They've tried their hardest to work with him. And ultimately, if you look at that Abu Dhabi race weekend, he did a good job, but did he do enough? Ultimately, he qualified on the soft tyre. Max qualified on the medium tyre, and Alex still couldn't get close enough to really become a team player at Red Bull. All right, as the race played out, he did put some pressure on the Mercedes in the later stages, but it didn't really have an impact. So he hasn't done enough for me, and I would like to see them mix it up and get Sergio in there and just see what he can do. But let's see. Sonoda to AlphaTauri, another one, says Laz. Absolutely, I think we'll hear about that probably at the same time that we hear if it is indeed Sergio moving into the Red Bull seat. I think they'll announce probably both of those drivers either at the same time or very close to each other. And that, I imagine, will happen very, very soon now. Let's see, what else are we saying here? I like Albon, but Perez should get the seat. Josh Smith. Will we see Nico the Great back in F1 22 or after? If you mean Hulkenberg, and I assume you do, I don't think so. I honestly think that his days are done. And it's a real shame because he's a talented driver, but he hasn't had the opportunities that Sergio has had this year. If you look at those two together, two very experienced drivers, similar, I guess, points in their career in terms of experience. Sergio is the one that's had the car underneath him this year to show what he can do, and he's taken advantage of that. Nico did a great job on the odd occasion when he stepped in this year, but that wasn't enough to really cement his place for 2021 or perhaps for 2022. So I think, unfortunately, his time is probably gone. There are a host of new drivers, young drivers, on their way through. I think we've got a wealth of talent coming into Formula One next year and in the coming years, and I think that's a positive place for Formula One to be. Should Abu Dhabi be removed from the calendar? Well, look, on pure racing grounds, it isn't great, is it? But it's not going to be removed from the calendar because they've signed a very long-term deal, an extra special deal. They pay extra money to host the season finale. And as an event, particularly once we can have fans and sponsors and partners there, it's a very important event on the calendar. So I don't think it's going anywhere very soon. Of course, that money they pay is massively valuable to the pot that goes into the wider Formula One money pool. Right, let's see. I can see lots of you talking about McLaren, about Mazepin. Yes, we're going to get into all of that. I've got some questions lined up for those. So let's move on to the next question and take it from there. The next one comes from Ben Tripp asks this, which I think is a decent question. He says, oh, sorry, that's not the right one. Hang on. I said there'd be no technical hitches. I'm not counting that as a technical hitch. Ben Tripp says, given the controversy of Racing Point's copy of the Mercedes, why weren't they as successful as they could have been? They had good races and drivers. Was it a waste of money? Also, how did McLaren get P3? A brilliant season. And there's also you and this channel. Well, thank you very much, Ben. Appreciate that. I have massively enjoyed this season doing what I do here on the channel because we've had so much to talk about. Once we got going, so much to talk about. So thank you. I appreciate your comments there, but I've massively enjoyed it myself. It doesn't really feel like work when you're doing something you love like this. But let's go through what you're talking about there. First of all, Racing Point. Racing Point, you have to say, on one hand, they took a giant leap forward from where they were prior to this year, didn't they? They took a big step forward. So the investment or the methods they employed to generate that copy of last year's Mercedes, if you like, if you want to call it that, you've got to say on one hand worked. So they took a giant leap forward in terms of their performance, in terms of the performance of the car, and I think in terms of their scope for future performance as well. So if they hadn't done that, I think they would have been battling away where they were, probably at the bottom end of the midfield, with very little hope to, or very little scope to improve that car, given their limited resources that they have over the course of a season, and particularly over the course of 2 seasons, given that we're staying with more or less the same car for next year. So I think it was definitely the right decision, not a waste of money. I think it was a good decision. And look, let's face it, they probably had the 3rd quickest car for most of this season. They didn't finish 3rd in the championship. So is that a massive disappointment? Yes, on one hand, but they finished 4th, which actually is a decent result, and as I said before, a step up from the team. There are a number of reasons why they didn't finish 3rd, not least because they got 15 points deducted earlier on in the season because of that controversy around the rear brake ducts. Now, I'm not going to say they had 15 points wrongfully deducted. I'm not going to get into that at all, because if they went through the hearing, they lost those points, that's the way it is. They broke the rules, they lost the points. So that is their own fault. That's an own goal from their perspective, if indeed that was a fair and just penalty. But even on top of all of that, they also had a number of things that went wrong over the season with reliability, with the drivers getting COVID and having to sit out races in terms of Perez. They made mistakes. And, you can't afford to do that. Formula One, if you want to be a top team, it's about doing everything right. Everything. From designing the car to be fast, to developing it in all the right ways, to having 2 great drivers, a great pit stop crew, a great group of strategists. You've got to have every single piece of that puzzle working at the, as close to perfection as it can be done. And I'm not saying they didn't have a lot of those things, but I also think there's a large part of it when you take a giant leap forward with your car, particularly when you copy someone else's designs and someone else's philosophy. You haven't created that car from a seed, from nothing. And when you do that, you learn everything about it. You know the direction, you can see it, you can envisage the direction that it's going to be developed in. But they didn't have any of that. They took a set of designs that already existed and then had to learn it, had to work it out, had to figure out how to develop it. A car that had already been developed almost to its max by Mercedes last year, Racing Point then had to take it and try and develop it in slightly different areas and different directions and look for even more performance out of it. So not a waste of money for me. I think they did a great job with it. And actually, I don't think they should be too unhappy with P4 in the championship. I also think they've now got scope for next year to take that up one step further. If they got the third fastest car this year, there's nothing stopping them have the third fastest car next year. And if they had those 15 points back, which they won't get deducted next year for the same thing, of course, if they can have a cleaner championship, there's nothing stopping them really fighting up at the front. So I think it was a great year for them in that sense. Could have been better, definitely could have been a lot worse. And then on your final point around McLaren, how did McLaren get P3? Well, they got P3 because, like I've just been saying about Racing Point, well, McLaren did get almost everything right. Not everything. Had some pit stop disasters over the course of the year. They still had some reliability issues, but actually, especially in the closing part of the season, McLaren delivered when others weren't. McLaren got things right with both of their drivers getting the best out of their car. So McLaren probably had the fourth quickest car on most occasions, didn't they? Sometimes the fifth quickest. On occasions, the third quickest. You wouldn't say over a championship season they were the third fastest, and yet they snuck third place in the Constructors, which is a huge deal. And I was really, really pleased to see my former colleagues and friends in that garage having something to celebrate, because they haven't had that for a long time, especially at the end of a season. They've had the odd result, which might have gone well. They've got a podium here or there, but there's a lot of members of that team have never, in their careers in Formula One, experienced success, what you might term success. They still haven't experienced things like race wins and championship wins on the same level that I was fortunate enough to experience when I was there. And I can tell you those moments breed further success, but getting to the end of a championship, having something to celebrate, getting the champagne out is an amazing feeling. I know it's an amazing feeling. I've spoken to some of them as well. They're so proud of that achievement, and rightly so. And what that does is, of course, that inspires you to keep pushing on. You know how to do it. You know where you went wrong, where you went right. You know the formula for getting things right over a race weekend, for activating things in the right way, in the right order, and as close to perfection as can be done. So honestly, I genuinely am really happy for them, but I also think it's a great springboard for future success. They are on the way up, and that's a great place to be. Mercedes engines coming, Daniel Ricciardo coming. I think things are looking good for them in the future. John Stout says, McLaren also didn't take each other out all season, despite being close on the track. Respect. Very good point. Because they were always getting the max out the car. And you can kind of tell that by both drivers being really close to each other on a lot of occasions. They were absolutely maximising the tools that they had. And yet, they were very fair and respectful to each other. They didn't take each other out. And that's a really good point, John. Barry Redmond, or Redmond Barry, says, why didn't more drivers do donuts? I have no idea. I think actually it's probably because the top three were probably instructed, and I don't know this, was it just the top three? I think the top three were instructed to go to the start, finish straight. Everyone else is instructed by the marshals to go into the pit lane and park their car in the parc fermé zone. That's probably the reason. Daniel in McLaren will be fun, says Varun Sambi. I agree with you 100%. Daniel and Lando together is going to be a great fun, and that's also what a lot of those team members are looking forward to. They've had a really great year this year with the driver pairing they've had in terms of the atmosphere that those two drivers have created between them. I think that's only going to get even better with Daniel coming in next year. So things are looking up. It's positive at McLaren right now. And as somebody I saw mentioning earlier on, oh, there we go. Will 185 million be enough to help McLaren move forward towards the top, says Nick. They had some investment come into the team, didn't they? You may have seen this over the weekend. I think that's another really positive sign. Yes, they've sold another stake in McLaren. So on one hand, they've let a little piece of McLaren go, which will upset some people, but they've taken a huge amount of money for that. And look, money, whether we like it or not, money in Formula One, cash is king. And even with a cost cap coming in, teams like McLaren, who are just around that cost cap figure anyway, still need to bring the investment in to reach that cost cap. And so I think in terms of that, as a status for the team, having that long-term investment, which that is a great place. Gives them stability, gives them the ability to invest in certain areas. Look, as I keep saying, things are very positive at McLaren, and I think that's a great place to be. Really good for the future of the team. Let me see. Rick is going to dominate Lando, says individual one. Well, interesting point. I think he may well do, but I'm not sure he will straight away. If you think about how he came into Renault, it took him a while to adapt to that car. The McLaren is definitely a different car to the Renault. Different power unit, of course, this time around, next time around too. So I think, Daniel Ricciardo for me is one of the top tier of drivers in Formula One. Lando is a great driver, but nowhere near as experienced yet. So I do imagine that Daniel will dominate that pairing eventually. But I think in the beginning, it could end up being mighty close. Alexander Spekowski. Mark, well, I've just covered this one, but he says, Mark, what are your thoughts on Perez getting a seat? I don't know if you were late, Alexander, but if you were, that will teach you. Be here at 9 o'clock. We covered this. Only joking. I think Sergio Perez, according to all the rumours coming out of Abu Dhabi, is going to be announced at Red Bull in some capacity over the next week or so, we expect. And I think that's a great decision. I think he thoroughly deserves it. He's been on fire this year. I think one of the top drivers this year, if we think about, driver performance over the course of the season. For me, he's been one of the standout guys. 4th in the championship, having missed 2 races with COVID. Great result. Daddy Rick's a great all-rounder and gives 100% all the time. Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think he's a really strong driver. I think Lewis will sign for 1 more year at 35 million, says John Roberts. So I think this is the biggest sticking point that Lewis and Mercedes have. Of course, on one hand, for Lewis, signing for 1 more year gives him that opportunity to take that 8th world title. Something that, even if he says it doesn't, means a lot to him. But I also think it means quite a lot to the team. To be unprecedented in terms of the number of titles that he's won. And he has a great opportunity to do that next year. Not really any major competition over a season-long campaign to stop him doing that. Does he only want to do that and then walk away? Mercedes will not want to give him just 1 year because everything changes in 2022. By changing your driver lining and putting a new guy in at that point is a slight risk in that sense. All right, they've got George Russell, who's already proved he can do the job. But I also think that Lewis must have a little bit of intrigue around 2022. Wanting to try those cars, wanting to experiment and just see what happens in 22. So I think for me, Lewis probably will want a 2-year deal. The team may want to sign him on a 3-year deal because that gives them a little bit more stability. And that maybe is where the sticking point is right now. So we'll see. Let me see. How far through the season do you think Fernando will last at Renault before he gets frustrated and quits, says Domestos Bleach. I don't think he's going to quit for a second. I really honestly don't. I do think it's going to be interesting to see how he goes, if things don't go his way. But let's face it, the Renault, on a number of occasions, has come good. All right, they struggle a little bit in Abu Dhabi. At certain races, they've struggled. So it's a temperamental car at the moment. It's not good everywhere all the time. But it's a lot better than it was a year ago, 2 years ago. And that, I think, will give Fernando a lot of encouragement. As long as he can fight for podiums and be in the mix. And look, Daniel Ricciardo has already put that thing on the podium. If Fernando can be in that fight too, he'll be happy. He'll have something to go for. It's not like when he was at McLaren, he was literally, struggling to get a point. This is a bit more of a fight. And look, they're going to rebrand the team. It's a bit of a fresh start. There's nothing really. I think everything's going to get closer again next year because of the changes and the convergence of power units that they're already showing now. So I think Fernando will be fine next year, and I'm really excited to see how he goes. And in fact, on the subject of Fernando, let's talk about this one because Thomas Ashley says this. He says, hi Mark, after watching the Renault going around the track with Alonso, can you explain why it looks so much quicker than the F1 cars today, even though today's cars are quicker? Has it got something to do with the size and weight of the car? How good was it seeing Fernando go around in that old Renault? I thought it was absolutely fantastic. The whole of the paddock stopped. All the broadcasts just stopped. Any interviews that are happening stopped. And, you know, that says an awful lot about how that sound of that car and the sight of it going round, you know, people miss that massively. I thought it was very telling that a lot of the broadcasters just stopped what they were doing and kind of cranked up the audio. I think even Lewis stopped an interview he was halfway through and just sort of turned and looked in total awe, forgot the question he'd been asked and started talking about the sound of that old car. And, you know, can we ignore that forever? You know, it's really hard, isn't it? Because we're not going to go back to V8s or V10s. That clearly just isn't going to happen. We're going in a very different direction. But that was one of the big wow factors to Formula One. Formula One should be wow moments all over the place. Should be great racing that make you go wow. I love the pit stops. 2-second pit stops are wow for me. But also we should have the sound of a car like that is a huge wow. And it's a real shame that that's gone. So perhaps we should start focusing on getting some of that back somehow. But it's not going to be easy. It's not a simple solution. It would mean a very different architecture of engine, a very different type of engine. And I just can't see it happening. So that's the first thing. In answer to your question, Thomas, one of the biggest reasons that it appeared to be going so fast is definitely the sound, because they sound way, way quicker than the current cars. And that's just a fact. If you're watching an onboard, it's incredible. The sound, the gear changes, it's mind-blowing. So they look fast, which makes you think they're fast. But also, yes, you said there, is it the size and weight? It is both of those things. They are a lot lighter, they are a lot smaller, which means they're a lot more nimble. So they don't have as much downforce on them, but they are definitely more nimble cars. They can be thrown around the sort of twisty sections of a racetrack far quicker or far more dynamically than the current cars. And definitely that has an impact on how you perceive that car going. If you had no stopwatch on either, I agree with you. You might even think that looked or appeared to be going quicker, even though it isn't. So yeah, it's a shame. I think one of the negatives about current cars is definitely how big they are and how heavy they are. And I appreciate that because of their size, they're so big, and that's how we generate so much downforce. And as a result of that downforce, that's how we get the lap times that are breaking records all over the place, combined with the hybrid power unit. So if we wanted to shrink the cars back down to that old size, we'd have to sacrifice a huge amount of downforce, and the cars ultimately wouldn't go as quickly. But is that really a problem? Are lap times the things that really matter to fans, or is it cars that look quick, can race each other, go wheel to wheel, be dynamic? For me, the latter is probably the more important. Get a two-stroke in it, says Steve YouTube. Alonso seems calmer, says Jamie Zach. He is. He's a more mature guy. He's got very little pressure on him now. He's the elder statesman. He's a two-time world champion strolling back into the paddock, you know, without the pressure of desperately looking for another title. I'm sure he is. I'm sure he'd love one, but that's not the biggest thing on his agenda right now. It's about trying these cars. It's about getting back into it, mixing wheel to wheel with these other greats on the grid. I think he's a lot calmer and a lot more mature. Lap times really don't matter. Yes, I mean, I kind of agree. It's great that we're breaking records. It's great that these cars will be remembered as being the fastest ever. I think it's nice that we've done that. To be able to achieve that is significant. But I think we've also proved that it's not the most important thing, and we can afford to sacrifice some lap time if we can help for, you know, the cars provide better racing, which is, of course, what we're trying to do in 2022. Will Liberty Media ensure Formula One out-techs and outdoes Formula E? Will they out-tech Formula E? I mean, they're going to be very different tech. I think they will out-tech because ultimately Formula One still has a huge amount of money going into it, much more money in the system than Formula E does. Formula E is advancing a very specific set of technologies, battery-powered electric motors, of course. And that's something Formula One is doing on a small level in its hybrid sense, but not on a huge level. Oh, hey, Mum. Heather Chalk. 1,100 watching, but only 24 likes. Hit the like. My mum telling everyone to hit the like button. Listen to my mum. Hit that like button. Cheers, Mum. Yeah, Formula E has got this very specific set of tech. Formula One has tech in so many other areas, things like gearbox tech, suspension tech, materials technology, and of course things like energy storage and motors through the hybrid side of things, and the combustion power, and they're going to be advancing things like sustainable fuel technology. So I don't think Formula E is going to out-tech Formula One, it's just that they're going in very different directions. Yeah, thanks guys. Yeah, don't argue with my mum, just do what she says. Braveheart says, how much can Ferrari improve the power unit for next year? Well, I think significantly, and this is a good point. You know, they're already showing signs that they are quite confident that they're going to be able to improve significantly, and given where they are from where they were, you've got to say they are the team that has the most opportunity to advance forward, because we've got a small amount of scope in aerodynamic terms to make improvements next year. A, because aero development is still free and open, the aerodynamic surfaces are not restricted like the other parts of the car are. So there's scope anyway with the natural incremental gains that teams can make. We've also got the changes to aero, you know, around the rear of the floor, just in front of the rear tyres. That's an opportunity. So somebody might steal a march on someone else by doing a better job. But in terms of power units, there's very little scope for most people to make improvements because they're already operating at the very top end of where they think they're able to do so. Ferrari are nowhere near their maximum limit because of the problems they've had in adapting an engine to a set of regulations that perhaps they weren't necessarily adhering to prior to 2020. Therefore, they've got this enormous chunk of performance that's being untapped at the top end of their power unit that nobody else has that much scope to improve. So yes, absolutely, Ferrari can take significant steps forward. Are they going to take them? I think you'd have to say it'd be crazy if they couldn't do it. If they can't take some kind of leap forward, something's gone horribly wrong because they can't go much further backwards. That might bring Ferrari just back into the mix because we've already seen a number of occasions this year where the Ferrari car, particularly in the hands of Charles Leclerc, has managed to do great things. You know, to manage to be up there, mixing it in the top 4, 5, 6, you know. If he can get a great power unit underneath him or an improved power unit, then see you all laughing at my mum. Everyone smash that like button, yes. How are we doing here? How many more likes? Look at that, 275 likes. Thanks, mum. So there you go. I think that's hopefully answered that one. Right, let's move on. What else have we got here? What else have we got in the questions that I've picked? Oh yeah, here's a quick one from John Norris. John says this. He says, are all personnel on a pit crew considered mechanics or only the people who work on the car between practices, qualifying and races? Now, some of you may well know this, but lots of you won't. So I thought it's a really good point and we should address it. So John, there are a set of mechanics. The way the team's made up, there's a set of mechanics on each car. That's probably, depending on the teams, because they all have slightly different ways of doing it. There's normally a front end guy, there's probably 2 rear end guys, a gearbox guy, a number 1 mechanic, so maybe 5 mechanics on each car. You might have a couple of floating mechanics as well, depending on the setup of each team. 5 mechanics on each car, let's say, so that's 10 straight away. There's more people than that, clearly around a pit stop crew. So on top of the pit stop mechanics, you've also got other people like truckies, the guys that literally drive the trucks to races, the support crew, from people like the guys that do the carbon work in the background, some of the engine mechanic guys, the engine mechanical guys might be involved. There might even be some of the engineers in there. So the rest of the people around the pit stop crew that aren't actual mechanics are made up of anyone else from around that garage that A, wants to do it, can handle the pressure, and is good enough or quick enough or reliable enough to do it. So there is a number of spaces that are open to people getting involved, and generally what they'll do is have a sort of tryout period in the off season where if you want to have a go at a certain position, this is the way we used to always do it, you get the chance to try out for that position, and ultimately if you're quick enough and reliable enough, steady enough, then you might well get that job. So there's a handful of the mechanics around the pit crew are mechanics, but on top of that there are also other people who are, I guess, technically known as support crew that come into that role as well. Let's see. Ferrari seem confident about next year's engine, Patrick. Yeah, I think they do. I think the fact that they've said they've seen significant gains, they will always play that down. So if they've said they've seen significant gains, which I think they have, I think that's a fairly positive sign that they have actually done. Things are looking pretty good for them. Reliability, obviously, something you haven't really tested properly in the field yet. Right, let's move it on. All right, the Mazepin story I am going to address. So let's get to that one. Let's bring this one in because, this is one of those controversial subjects, but look, you know me, I don't mind addressing a controversial subject if we have to. And Yanni says, F1's decided not to do anything about the Mazepin situation. What's your view on all of this? So my views on this are quite firm, really, in that I'm not going to say that anyone's handled this badly yet, because they haven't handled it. Haas are handling it internally, and until we know what they're going to do, it's very difficult to criticise the way the team or Formula One are dealing with it. Formula One, I think, definitely could have been stronger, because at the moment all they've said is we're going to let the team handle it. Ultimately, he's going to be an employee of them, so they will have to handle it. But if I was Formula One and Mazepin wasn't handled in a way that I thought was deemed sufficient to uphold the standards that Formula One and all of its participants need to be upheld to, then I would then step in if I was running Formula One. I would want to step in and override or overrule the team, or want to place my own sanctions or my own stamp on all of this. In terms of the incident itself, I think it's absolutely disgraceful. I think there's no other way to describe it. And the first thing that struck me when I, saw that rear its ugly head on social media was that, I've got a daughter. I've got a daughter through there who's 20 years old. And I know, I don't look old enough. But, my first thought was she's probably around a similar age to that girl in the video. And if that was my daughter, I would be absolutely enraged and disgusted. And so there's two things. The fact that he did it is disgusting in itself. And then the fact that it was posted on social media is equally as disgusting for me, because the disrespect it shows is unbelievable. And I know that the girl has said it was her that posted it. I don't think any of us believe that for one single second. I'm not buying that at all. And I'm afraid that this is not the first time that Mazepin has done something like this to let himself down and be controversial and ultimately let the sport that we all love down, because that's what he's done. These guys are role models for young kids. And, everybody, as soon as he became a Formula One driver, was announced as a Formula One driver, I'm sure many of you did it as well. You probably went and followed him on social media. If you weren't following him already, you probably went and followed him. Millions, hundreds of thousands maybe, of kids will have probably done the same thing. Will have probably gone and searched him up online. Who's this new kid who's a new Formula One driver? And that's what they see. So yes, I'm disgusted with it, and I hope that it's dealt with severely. My biggest worry, and I'm sure this is what many of you are saying, is that Haas have a huge problem on their hands, because this driver and his dad have almost, if you believe the reports, saved the team from being dissolved financially. They have come in with a huge amount of money at a point when Gene Haas was probably just about ready to jack it in. And the problem that they have there is that if you say, right, well, this is so serious, we don't want his money. Well, then what happens then? Does the team then fold, and do all these hundreds of people lose their jobs? Because that's a significant consequence as well. And I think, that's why I don't envy the job of Haas and Günther Steiner and Gene Haas to deal with this. I think dealing with it internally is absolutely the right thing, but I hope when all of this is done and dusted, they come out and let us know what's happened, because I don't think any of us need another controversial subject or topic or situation in Formula One being swept under the carpet like we've seen so often. So I hope they take a stand on this. I hope they deal with it severely. I hope that the FIA or Formula One or both also deal with it severely once the whole facts of the matter and the investigation, if you want to call it that, not that it needs too much of an investigation, plays out. There we go. That's my thoughts on it. As Nutcracker, as Lewis said, money talks. Well, Money definitely does talk in Formula One. That is simply a fact. And as I said there, it's slightly more complicated about just money talking. It's not just about performance. You know, this is about saving a team and the people within that team. And to have them all lose their jobs as a result of this idiot, and yeah, I'm going to call him an idiot, would be also very, very harsh. So I don't know what the right answer is. It's a very tricky one, a very difficult one, but I am disgusted with his behaviour. There we go. Andy Lowe says, a rich boy who's never been taught values and respect. And I'm not going to go to the point of judging him because I don't know him. Yes, that's a very easy thing to surmise from all of that. He didn't show any values or respect, and absolutely, I 100% agree with you on that. But you know, everybody's going to be saying, yeah, he's just a rich kid who doesn't care about women, doesn't care about values or respect. That may well be true, but we can't really judge that without knowing him, other than what we've seen, which shows in that moment he had zero respect and zero values. Anyway, there we go. I'm going to move it on because whilst that isn't a really important subject, I don't want it to take over the entire stream. So I've got one more question here, which is hopefully a quick one, and then we'll come to you guys in the comments. This is Teddy Soul. Says, what happens to the money that teams pay as a fine to the FIA? Does it go into the FIA cash pile? Do they forward it to the Action of Road Safety? If a team causes damage to another car with theirs and they get fined, does that money end up in the team that got hit? So the very simple answer to that is that the money that teams pay the FIA in fines over the race weekend does just go into the FIA's pot. It goes into their coffers, if you like. It's what helps to run the sport and to run the FIA. So some of it will be filtered off into the road safety campaigns, it will be into grassroots, it will be into Formula One itself. The expenses that Formula One has will all be paid by things like that. They go into that pot, so that helps pay for everything that the FIA need. So that's where it goes. In terms of does any of it go to a team that might have had their car damaged from an incident that was then subsequently fined for? No. If you have a crash in Formula One, whether it was your fault or not, the agreement between everybody is that you just take the hit. That's racing. If somebody catapults through you and destroys your car, you don't go knocking on their door and say, right, I want some money because that wasn't our fault. You just accept it as part of racing. When you get onto that racetrack, you sign away and you accept that risk. And that's just unfortunate. So unfortunately, that's the way it is. You do not get anything out of those fines if you were wiped out in a crash that was deemed illegal. Right, let's see. That's all my questions done. So let's move on to you guys. Oh, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, by the way. I forgot to say this right at the top of the show. We've got 10 minutes left. In 5 minutes' time, I'm going to announce the winners of those prizes that I was giving away in the video last week. So if you entered that competition, thank you. Hang around. I'm about to tell you who's won. Let's get some questions first. I forgot, I should have said that right at the start. Let's see what you want to talk about then. Anybody know how the investigation's going in Grosjean's car? Have the FIA taken it away from inspection? So don't know the result already. There is no result yet of that investigation from Grosjean's car. Of course, let's not forget the races came thick and fast after that. So they haven't really had much of an opportunity. That's what will be happening now. Yes, they will absolutely have photographed that car to death. They'll have taken pictures of every single angle. Same with the barrier. They'll be reviewing video evidence, the high motion camera, the super slow-mo camera that looks back at the driver that we don't get access to as media, as fans, but the FIA do. It's actually a safety camera that gets multiple frames per second of a driver in an incident like that. So in that massive impact, they'll be able to see relatively clearly what's happening to the driver's head, and that's what it's for in that situation. They'll take all of that away together with the data and conduct their investigation. The team will probably take the car back, unless the FIA have impounded it, which I don't think they will. I think they'll have just taken all the pictures, then they'll give it back to the team. The team will be under instruction not to destroy it or anything like that in case it's required as part of the investigation further down the line. So that's essentially, I think, where they're at, and we'll hear probably in the coming weeks as to what the result is. How will the teams deal with a shortened off-season? Well, they'll just deal with it because they've got no choice. And yes, it makes it tricky in terms of time off. You know, the guys have had a really intense period, as I said before, so they're all looking forward to some time off now. But it's going to be less time off because the period when you've got to get back into work and start preparing for next year comes much sooner than it would have done if you'd finished earlier in the season. So that's the first thing. But also, they're all well aware of what's happening next year. And part of the reason for all of this, you know, these restrictions around not changing too much is for exactly that. You know, we know we're carrying over the chassis, for example, from this year to next year. And so for that reason, there's less work to do in that regard. Still a lot of work to do, but not quite the same as we would have had on a normal season where you're redesigning and rebuilding every aspect of a brand new car. So there's less work, there is also less time, but Formula One teams are very good at just getting on with it and dealing with stuff, and that is what they will do. Luke K. Will we have live streams every Monday during the off-season? Good point. I was going to mention this. So no is the short answer. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to do another live stream next week. So same time, same place next Monday. That's partly because I think we're almost certainly going to get some driver news before then. So we'll definitely do that. Then I do plan to stop doing them for a while, you know, over Christmas. And at some point in the new year, ahead of testing or whenever news starts really building, I guess whenever you guys really want them, we'll start bringing them back. But we are going to have a break, definitely. We'll be back here next Monday. After that, we'll have a break. And then I don't know when we'll restart again. We'll figure that out. But I would love your input on that, of course. Have we discussed cameras over mirrors? Are mirrors mandatory, says Steve Martin. That's a really good point, and we've discussed this in the past. But yes, at the moment, mirrors are mandatory. It's in the regulations, the size of the mirror, the shape of the mirror is all mandatory. So we can't just ditch those and go for cameras just because if a team wanted to. But there's nothing really stopping us rewriting those rules and saying, look, this is a much more modern technology. It's potentially a more advantageous technology. Why don't we go to cameras? The answer to that question is, I don't know. I don't think there's any good reason why we shouldn't be starting to investigate whether we should go to cameras. It would mean that you could move that the screen that would obviously replace the mirrors. You could have that more central in the car, above the steering wheel or in front of the steering wheel. Obviously, there's an aero benefit to that, but also the potential to improve the visibility could be better because you could have multiple cameras if you wanted. You know, there's ways to do it. It will take some adjustment. It will take some getting used to. But I do believe that technology that's employed in almost every car around the world on the road has a place in Formula One and could be used to more effect than the mirrors that we currently have that are not quite useless, but not far off it. Right, so let's get one more and then I'm going to announce some winners for this competition. What do we all think of the Hamilton Straight, Andy Lowe? I think it's great. I think it's a really fitting announcement, a nice tribute. So yeah, I think it's thoroughly deserved. He seemed very emotional, didn't he, when he was told? I think it's great. I mean, what do you think? I thought it was great. More tales from the treehouse, says Roy. Yeah, I'll definitely try and do. I'm not stopping the videos. Let's make that clear. I'm not stopping making videos until next year. Just the live streams after next week, I'm going to put on pause for a little bit. But yeah, still going to be making videos because I love it. Right, let's get into some of these prizes. If you remember, I've got 3 of these calendars from Box, a signed copy of the hardback version of my own book, and this beautiful press kit from F1 Fragrances. Oh, it smells amazing when you open it up. Right, I have selected some winners. So if you entered this competition, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'm now going to show you who has won. So the F1 Fragrances press kit has been won by Matt Nunn. I don't know if you're on here, Matt, but congratulations. It doesn't matter if you're not. I'm going to go with the next one, which is one of the calendars. Has been won by Bella Bam 8. That is a calendar coming your way. I will make contact with all of you privately, of course, so don't send me your address in this live stream. Cole Flash is another one. Craig Cole, you have also won a calendar. Congratulations. What else have we got here? Another calendar goes to Jonty's Corner. Congratulations to you. Calendar coming your way. And that means that the final prize, which is a signed copy of my book, goes to Rob Black. Congratulations to all of you. As I said before, thank you so much for taking part in that competition. Loads of you shared the video. Lots of you have also messaged me to say that some of the Christmas gift ideas that I suggested in that video, you have already done. Somebody said to me the other day, they went on the Silverstone experience, having seen it on my video. So well done. And they also said it was great. So if you haven't done that, definitely check that out. You can still see all of those Christmas gift suggestions, of course, in that video on my channel. But those guys, Matt Nunn, Bellabam8, Cole Flash, Jonty's Corner, and Treebor Bob UK, you guys have all been winners in that prize. I will contact you all directly and get your addresses and get those out to you as soon as I possibly can. So thank you very much. Right, a couple of minutes then to finish off. Let's see, where are we at? Yeah, I've got no more questions, so let's see what you want to talk about. Merry Christmas, Marc's mum. I don't know if you're still watching, Mum, but of course you're still watching. Thanks very much for that. We've got up to 370 likes from about 11, I think it was you said, so thanks very much for that. Right, thanks for the videos throughout the year, says Tom Walsh. Well, do you know what? Let's finish up with some thank yous. Thank you for saying that, Tom, I appreciate it. But thank you guys for watching and taking part. Not just watching, interacting. Because, you know, you'll have seen, I'm sure many of you saw the video that I did where I sort of went through a typical Friday of mine. Showed you when I get up in the mornings, I do my exercises outside, and then I come in and I go through all the messages that you guys sent, the comments of the videos. It's one of my favourite things to do in the morning. I really enjoy the interaction that you guys... oh yeah, Mum's still there. Hi, Mum. I really enjoy all the interaction that you guys put into this channel. It makes it worthwhile for me to put the effort that I put in, which is a lot of effort, by the way. This is a full-time job it's become, particularly over the course of 2020 when there's been not much else in terms of full-time jobs going on. So I've really appreciated your interaction. I hope we've managed to keep each other going because this keeps me going. This keeps me motivated, it keeps me going. And I know from what many of you have said, it does the same for you, so thank you very much. Reveal of Das, says Clansom. What do you want revealed of Das? I think we've done that, haven't we? We've covered that. I don't think there's too many secrets around Das left these days. Andy Hopton, Wheeler Dealer live streams. I'll definitely take you behind the scenes on Wheeler Dealers over the course of 2021 as well, absolutely. If you're into cars, definitely hang around because there will be some behind the scenes on the set, in the studio, stuff with Mike, stuff with the cars. So yeah, if you're into that, that's coming your way too. Do you think there are too many races next year? Josh Smith. I know that most people working in Formula One think there are too many races. It's a difficult one, isn't it? What do you think as fans? Do you just want more and more races, as many as you can get? Or is there a magic number where actually you can't keep up with them? You can't commit that many weekends to watching and following the sport right throughout a weekend. I think that's a fair point too. So yeah, for me, if I'm really honest, I think around 20 is a good number. I think for most people working in the sport, that's what they feel. Around 20 is fine. Too much more than that becomes really tricky. I mean, I've done seasons when we've had 16. I know we've had 17 this year, but 16 used to be a full calendar. So yeah, there we go. I think it could easily escalate to a number that's unsustainable within the current format, the current model. And I definitely think all the teams are looking at that. Right, I think it is definitely beer o'clock. End of season beer o'clock. Really looking forward to it. Thank you guys. Appreciate it all again. I hope you have a great week. I will definitely be back with more stuff this week. I don't know what yet, but shout me if you've got any ideas for videos, both now and over the off season. I would love your thoughts. Keep it coming. I will see you all very soon. And we got through one without the tech falling apart. Woohoo! See you later, guys. Have a good week. Ta-da.